this series beginning today. Then in 2018, in January, February, we have more. Is there a continuation of the image?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So the next would be Tuesday, January 9th, 2018. And then we have February and March. So the way to find out about the future webinars will be to subscribe to the Brilliance in Commerce newsletter. It's also been called the La Vérité newsletter. La Vérité means the truth in French. And that is going to be where you will see all the announcements about upcoming webinars. So please access that at houseoffreedomtrust.com with dashes in between each of the words, House of Freedom Trust with dashes between each word.com. Click on more and then newsletter sign up. Or we can be reached by telephone at 360-200.
Yeah, I got a call in. They said they can hear. So there's something wrong.
As I was saying, the phone number is 360-200-7521. So this will be repeated later in the webinar, but I just wanted to give everyone up front, those who are attending early, these are the contact points to be in touch with us. And next. We are talking about international natural law trusts, and some of you may already have seen this, but basically we are looking at how the cultural creatives, the change makers, the conscious wealth managers and contributors to the golden age are quietly transacting sacred commerce through an advanced asset protection instrument, previously a best kept secret of the super rich. For those who don't have visuals and are listening by audio, I am sharing this, what's on the screen. Peaceful people can benefit from operating one or more of these trusts, which concentrate the best of best asset protection secrets, so that we have these secrets have been shared by the elite, the super rich, down through the ages, and we've condensed that into the fewest words and simplified the language so as to minimize the legalese and maximize common politeness and understandability. These trusts can be operated in most countries, anywhere in the world. Trust clients may become either trustees or creators, beneficiaries, and managers. These international, pure natural law, sovereign, irrevocable trusts have no income tax filing requirements. They are infinitely flexible and can be adapted to any ethical, lawful, and noble purpose. They have a 100% success rate, meaning they have never been penetrated or invalidated in over 3 decades of use. Probably longer than that. We say 3 decades because we know from our own experience that it's been that long. And this has been the trust of choice for those preparing for the global currency reset as the best vehicle for holding wealth and for preparing one's estate for generations to come. Heirs can be endowed with successorship seamlessly, with no time delay, no probate, and no death taxes. Thousands of fortunate clients are quietly happy with these trusts. I want to introduce my good friend and partner, Randall Filner, who will be our main speaker today, and our trust writer extraordinaire. He's one of the world's premier trust writers. And he is the founder of White Light Unlimited and House of Freedom Trusts. He is a trustee of One People's Public Trust, the creator of International Natural Law Trust, and the director of the Trust Department of La Verité's Brilliance in Commerce. Mr. Filner graduated from the junior college in Haverhill, Massachusetts, in 1965. And from 66 to 71, he served in the U.S. Navy. on nuclear submarines, Dolphin qualified, and was a weapons control computer technician. In 1979, he graduated from Goddard College, Vermont, with a BA in education. Over the years, in his studies of trusts, he found that the best trusts in the world are the kind that the elite and the super rich have used. So being they have been kept quiet and are not taught in law schools or universities. For this creme de la creme of trust knowledge, private mentors proved to be far superior to institutionalized education. Thus, in the 1980s, he apprenticed with Mr. Val Bentley, who had 30 plus years experience in trust law in Sacramento and the San Francisco Bay Area. Likewise, he studied trust law with luminaries like Austin Scott, George Bogerts, and many others. Over the years, he has gradually written trusts for more and more prestigious clients throughout the world and has continued to gain and disseminate state-of-the-art knowledge, staying on the forefront of the perfection of the craft. So it's my very good pleasure and honor to introduce to you Randall Filner.
Hey, Randall, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and aloha from the island of Kauai in Hawaii. It's a pleasure for me to be here and be able to be speaking. We're going to cover many topics over the next hour or 20 minutes, whatever it is, then we'll take questions at the end. So we can start anytime you like. Tamsin, you had said that you wanted to post the certain things that I had written to you yesterday. Are you ready to do that, or should I just take it off the list that I have for myself?
I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie. You can go ahead and post those
Okay.
those slides, and he can go through them.
Can you see that?
Okay, yes. What is a trust? Well, trust is a private common law irrevocable trust. It is a contract between the grantors, two trustees, one that should be non-related to the grantor, and one or more beneficiaries. The grantor cannot be a trustee and sole beneficiary. Yeah, that's one of the things you have to remember. So you get to choose whether you want to be the grantor and the beneficiary and have two trustees, one a family member or a friend, and one that's not related to you. Or you can be a grantor and a trustee and have your family be the beneficiaries. So there's lots of ways to set these private trusts together, and it's private and it's common law, so it's not involved with any government saying you can do it or not do it. It's a contract between you and someone else, and you have the right underneath the Constitution to do any contract you want as long as it's used for not wrong principles. In other words, anything you can contract any way you want as long as you're not breaking the law. So that's what the trust does. It takes your assets or somebody else's assets and puts it into an irrevocable trust, and then the trustees are going to collaborate and with the grantor and go into any kind of situation that it wants to protect and to enhance those assets for the beneficiaries. Can be monetary investments, it can be real estate, it can be pretty much anything. Now, one of the things I do recommend is that you do not put a car in a trust with your house, because the car or a plane or a boat is a liability. It can hurt somebody. So as long as you follow those basic principles, you're fine. And then you have the trustees can be paid. They can have a fee system. You can do it on a monthly, or in the beginning, basically, when the grantor was in charge, the trustees would basically allow the grantor to make the investments or suggest to the trustees the investments they wanted to go into. They could put it into money or any kind of financial or real estate, anything that would benefit and enhance the estate. And that's how the wealthy have done it for 100 years. In fact, the common law or irrevocable trust goes back into Roman times, when they would set up a trust and they didn't own the property. The property was held for their benefit by trustees. So it has a long history. Part of the history was during the Crusades. The knights were going to go away from Europe and go to the Mid-East. And so they had their friend or the priest be the trustee on their estate. If they didn't come back, then that trustee would take care of any children left in the family, or it would go to the church or wherever the grantor would like it to go upon his death. And that's still the same thing today. The difference being, when the grantor dies, there is no probate, because the trust continues to go on. The trust does not die. It can be dissolved over a period of time or after a period of time, but it's not contingent upon whether the grantor is alive or not. And sometimes the way I write the trust is that it goes for 21 years. Every 25 years, in most law books, it says after 25 years, it needs to be renewed. I just say 21, and that gives everybody a chance to get together and say, yes, we want to keep it going. And it can go on for generations. So that's the basis of what the trust is all about. The document is about, depending on how many beneficiaries there are, the trust is anywhere from 35 pages to 40 pages. Depends on how many people get involved. But you have a trust indenture, which is the first part of the trust. It's about 16 pages, and it outlines what it is that you want as grantor to happen, and what's going to happen to the money and how it's going to be handled, where you want it to go, and what you want it to do. Then the middle part is where you have your appointments and all your forms of who the beneficiaries are, who the trustees are. They all sign it. Parts of it are notarized. And then you have the minutes, and the minutes in particular are always private, are always held in a private capacity. There's no need for anybody to see what the minutes are, and that's why it's called a private independent trust. So it's up to, in fact, and the way I write the trust is that the trustees are under fiduciary responsibility, and they can be fined if they let any information go without the express consent of all the trustees. That's the gist. So we have another slide.
Yeah, can you see it? I just slid it forward.
Oh, okay. So if the grantor is the beneficiary, he can receive most of the benefit if he chooses. He can also include his family as beneficiaries, or his church could be a beneficiary. He may have some endeavors that he wants to support, whatever it is. It's up to the grantor. And trustees are paid accordingly. When we first began, basically we'd have a meeting twice a year. Trustees and the grantor and the beneficiaries would go out and we'd just do a big dinner together, and that was the payment that the trustees took. Now, depending on the size of the financial obligation that the trustees have to go through, they can be paid accordingly. So they may be paid for each action that has to be done. If they have to go to the county and record turning over the property from the grantor to the trust, that has to be done, has to be recorded. If it's not recorded with the county, then it really doesn't belong to the trust. So that's a particularly poignant point. So that has to be done, so it can be paid for that. And then how active they are in participating in the actions of the trust. Now, the grantor can also have a nominee settler, and that person can be a trustee, one of the trustees. So if he is a trustee, then the second trustee has to be non-related to him or the beneficiary. Those are two important factors. That's next slide. So now that the trustees own the assets, the trustees own the assets, but it's for the benefit of the trust. So they have to they don't put it in their own name, they put it in their name as trustee for this particular trust. So in a sense, they do own it, but it's not for their personal enhancement. They can be paid for the work that they do, but it's for the protection enhancement of those assets. Working to the best of the ability, they work with the grantor. The grantor may say, I'd like to see those assets, some of those assets go here. I'd like to see some of those assets go over here. And it's so flexible. It's a working document. It's always pliable. The indenture can't be changed once it's done, and the grantor does give up all control of the trust, but it doesn't mean that he can't participate either as a trustee or a beneficiary and help direct the assets that are held in that trust. As long as the trustees don't have any malfeasance on their part, then that's fine. One of the things we do include is a protector's agreement. That's usually for the grantor, if he's not a trustee. And then if the trustees are not living up to their ability or up to their commitment, then the protector can come in and replace that trustee, but he has to replace him with a non-related second trustee. But they're responsible for their actions. Each trustee is responsible for his actions. If he carries out his actions accordingly, then the trust runs smoothly, and it can be changed. Amendments can be put together that has maybe changes a little bit of the wording so that something else can be included in the trust. They may want to limit something. It's truly a work in action. They're under the oath of privacy and can be fined if they violate it. It's like anybody that takes an oath. If you violate that privacy or that oath, then you can be replaced. Now, it is important that the trustees be trained. In other words, you can have your friend and you can have one of your family members be trustees, but they must be able to know how to make sure that those assets are held in private situations so that it's protected. Now, the reason you have a second trustee that's not related is it's an adverse trustee can say no to anyone. All the trustees have to say no to anyone outside of the trust. It's nobody's business except the trustees and the grantor. And then any claim against the trust must be under court subpoena. And that's why the trustees must be strong enough to say no to anybody outside the trust unless there is a valid action against the trust. And it's got to be backed by a subpoena from a court. Right, so here it is. Already we talked about how everything must be assigned to the trust is under the name of the trust. So land, house, bank accounts, investments, all are recorded and held by the trust. All assets need to be renamed or assigned to the trust, and that's why I have most of it under notary. So you need to get it notarized that validates the signatures of the trustees in that, and then you record it again with the county. Liability of the assets is limited when it's done correctly, because it doesn't belong to anybody. And as long as it's not a liability like a car or a plane, then that's what you want. That can be very safe. Now, if you have, I was taught that there's no need to put a car in trust unless it's $1 million vintage car. And then it would go into its own trust and be separated from any other asset. If you do that if you have a really vehicle that you want to have, or you lease a car, have the trust lease a car, because then the liability is on the leasing company and not on you. Same with any equipment that you're going to use to do any high-risk adventures. Or if you want to separate all the different trusts, then that's fine. Create a separate trust for each thing that would be a liability. Cars, trucks, planes. So we just talked about that. But like the coming RV, once that happens, you may want to, or however, there's a number of situations are going to come down. Some people are going to get an 800 number. Some people are in groups that are going to go and meet the bankers. But once you meet the bankers or whoever's taking care of the reevaluation, they're going to want to have you have a trust rather than have it personally. Because if you have a lot of foreign currency and it does change the US dollars, you don't want that in your name, because then it's going to be known. And so people are going to come knocking on the door for any number of things. And it would be liable to taxes if it's not in a trust. There it is. Everything is under oath for all aspects of privacy, especially the minutes and the dealings of the trust business. That's the key. You can, sometimes the bank will want to see the trust document. If you need to do that, in the old days, you just took in what when you get the trust document for me, there's the back part of it is what pages to take to the bank. And there's just a part of the most important part of the indenture is included in that, and it's going to be notarized, and then that's what you take to open up the bank account. Now, some banks, in the early days before, let's say before 9/11, the grantor or the manager, who is generally the manager, could go into the bank with documents, and the bank would allow the manager to open the account as long as it has to have its own EIN number, and you have to have certain paperwork. But after 9/11, it all changed, and a lot of banks, because they don't know about the private irrevocable trust, they don't want to deal with it. Some banks are fine with it, but they love it if you do a statutory trust, because it's filed with the state or the county. They feel safe with it because the county knows about it, and they're often not really open to a private common law trust. And it's so bizarre, because it's basically a very simple contract between usually three people, two trustees and the grantor. And that's, I don't know why, but I guess 9/11 really screwed up the banking system, and they became afraid of anything that they weren't familiar with. And nobody's trained in all the law schools. They don't teach about the private common law trust. They want you to have corporation or an LLC or a statutory trust. So that's what we're trying to stay away from. Discretion of distribution. Trust, they can hold or distribute either capital or income, or not income, but gains with their investments. So the trustees have discretionary control over how that new gain is distributed. Now, the grantor may want so much to go to the beneficiaries on a monthly or quarterly or yearly basis, or they may want to hold it until his death, and then upon his death, it's split up and given to the beneficiaries that are still alive. And the beneficiaries may change. Some beneficiaries may die. Trustees may, die or disappear. And so things will change during the course of this time frame. We're talking about 20 years. If we have, if you have that change, it's not a problem. So again, because it doesn't die, there's no probate or death. Most lawyers love probate and death taxes because they get to just have that probate or that estate sit on their desk when they take time with it, and they just take money off the
Lawrence,
top.
you're going to have to unmute yourself. Hold on. Go ahead, unmute yourself. Lawrence, please. I mean, Randall, I'm sorry.
And
Never mind. Go ahead. I'm sorry we interrupted you for a second there. Go ahead.
no problem. They like that. So done correctly, the trust continues until all parties agree to its dissolution. And it can go on because the parties can say, well, we'd like to just extend this and build the assets. The only reason that some of the trusts that are 200 years old finally dissolved because there were so many beneficiaries that they couldn't keep track of it all. So they said, okay, we're dissolving this trust now, and all the beneficiaries are going to get whatever's left, depending on how much it was initially decided that they would get. And then it's over. And then each person can go and create their own trust with what they get from the beneficial interest. It avoids or reduces taxes. Splitting new capital, trust can reduce or have no tax. So it just depends on how you want to work it, but it's not required to file. In fact, a lot of trusts will just take whatever new increase comes, and then it goes to the beneficiaries, and so there's no tax at all on the trust. And if there is a tax, the beneficiaries take care of it. So the trust is basically free from that taxation process. Now you can also, I've worked with 2 or 3 different trusts along the way, and I have one that does file a tax return, 1041, but all of the profit that was in that trust has gone on to something else. So there isn't any, so it's a zero tax liability on that trust, even though it files a return. Okay, I guess we're opening for questions. Does anybody not understand some aspect that they want to ask about?
I'm going to say there's a spot, if you guys who are on video, you guys are on your computer or your phone, who didn't call in, if you click on participants at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little window open, and at the bottom you'll see something that says raise hand. So you can click on raise hand, and I can select you to ask a question if you'd like to ask. Sarah M. has a question. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi. I hope that I heard well. I was taking care of my husband at the same time, so forgive me if I'm asking a question that was already should be made clear. So am I correct that the trustee cannot be a beneficiary?
No, the trustee can be one of the beneficiaries. He just can't be the sole beneficiary.
Okay.
You can't be like I had one client that wanted to be, he was going to get a nominee grantor, and then he was going to be the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary, and that doesn't work. There's no separation between the asset and basically the trustee who put the initial funding into the trust.
Got it.
So you have to have a second trustee, and it's best also if you can just have a sole beneficiary, but you can't be a sole trustee. You have to have another. You have to have a trustee that can say no, and that's typically someone who is non-related to the grantor or the other trustee. Somebody's got to be able to say no.
Okay. So, oh dear, whoever is that, can somebody mute that? Is there someone in your background that's doing that, or is that someone else? But
I don't really know.
Looks like Stu has he's unmuted there. But anyway, back to my question. So a trust can be a beneficiary, is that correct?
Another trust?
Yes, another trust can be a beneficiary, is that correct? Okay, and any changes that you make that, let's say, the trustee makes, it doesn't have to be reported to anyone. These are all private, and we can make a decision, and then the next day we can change that decision.
Yes, but every time you take an action, every time you make an action, it has to be recorded in the minutes.
Correct.
And you decide on one day to do this, everybody signs, and then the next day you decide, oh, that's not going to work, we don't want to do that. Then you just make a minute that states that we decided not to do that, and you keep all of that paperwork in a file, so you always have access to there's always a paper trail.
Right.
Trustee to know what's going on.
And you use things like minute orders and things like that. And
Sure, it can be handwritten notes, but each trustee has to also sign it. And if it's a major transaction, then I suggest that you also get it notarized.
okay. And let's see. Oh dear. Okay. Now, but you can have just one trustee who's also can be, you don't have to have more than one trustee as long as the beneficiary is not that trustee, sole trustee, correct?
That's correct. But
okay.
if you're the solo trustee, then it's best to have a second trustee in the waiting. In other words,
a successor trustee?
Yes, successor trustee.
Great. Okay. And so is the grantor the person who I've studied this quite a bit, and so we use different terms. Is the grantor the person who had the assets and deposited the assets into the into the trust, or is the grantor the creator?
the grantor and the creator is the same. It's just two different words for the same person.
Okay, so the grantor is the creator, okay?
Settlor, grantor, and creators, they're one person. That can be, he can be the sole beneficiary with two other trustees, or he can have multiple beneficiaries as well.
Right, but the creator should not be the trustee or a beneficiary, correct?
Not singly, no.
Okay.
You can't be the creator and the trustee and the beneficiary. There's no separation.
Okay, got it. Okay, let's see, what was the other thing? My understanding is that if you are, let's say in my case, I'll be the sole trustee, and so I will also be the managing trustee. And this is actually going to be quite a bit of work for me because there's going to be quite a bit of money and it's relating quite a bit. It's a humanitarian project.
Right.
And so my understanding is that I could give myself a salary, for that work.
Of course.
I heard you say something about, at first you could, go do it with a dinner or whatever. But in order for me to run a nonprofit organization and waive my fee for running that, I need to get paid somewhere, and I plan to get paid as the managing trustee from the trust, and that is acceptable.
Absolutely, and if there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, then you also have to consider paying the other trustee as well. Both trustees.
There is no other trustee. That's just me. I'm the sole trustee.
Okay, and who are the beneficiaries?
Beneficiaries are people non-related to me.
Okay, fine. So
Okay.
yes,
Or a trust.
Salary or compensation for what you feel is a fair salary.
Yeah, and I was going to do that instead of I can't make myself a beneficiary because I'm the sole trustee, right? So,
No.
But okay, so now the beneficiary can be a trust. If the beneficiary is a trust, then that means that whatever is transferred to that trust is non-taxable, correct? Because it's from trust to trust.
Right, and because what you get is when you put money into the other trust, it's a non-taxable event because you're going to receive beneficial interest from that trust.
Okay, so now here's the big question. I want to create when I create this trust, I'm going to be the on the IRS, in terms of the IRS, I'm going to be the managing, let's see, what do they call it? There's two boxes you can check for the IRS. One is that you own the assets, and the other one is you're not the asset owner. And I forget what that box is called. But
there's the responsible party, and then there's the trustee. And you can play both of those roles as far as filling out and getting an EIN number. You can play both of those roles because you are a trustee and you're the responsible party. But most people, when they do it, if they're the grantor, then they're the responsible party, and the trustee just puts his name on as trustee. But you can do both of that.
Okay, so
you know what? We're going to jump in here. Sarah, it's a lot of questions. We need to give some other people a chance to ask some questions as well. And my understanding is this is going to be a series of, there will be a series of learning videos coming forward. There's so much to this. I mean, I have one of these trusts, and it's a lot to learn what each position does and can do. Does that sound good to you, Randall? We
Sure.
take another question from another person. Sarah, thank you so much, and we're going to mute you, and we're glad that you're doing what you're doing. And we're going to ask Al-Aziz. Go ahead, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I actually have two questions. The most important one is you're talking about having signatures notarized, and I'm sorry, and but if you're in the States or possibly in Canada, I guess that'll work. But in other countries, for example, France or other European countries, the notary it's very rare for notaries to actually notarize signatures. Would, for example, the signature of 2 witnesses or 3
Sure.
witnesses be enough?
Yes, 2 witnesses also works.
Okay, perfect. Now, I guess you sort of answered the second question when you answered Sarah. And this is about an existing trust, actually. My husband passed away 4 months ago. He was a trustee to this one trust, and before his passing, he the trust got a successor trustee, but it was done in the form of a like an addendum to the initial trust.
Sure.
Can that work out fine? And of course, the signature, because it was in the French country, the signatures were had 2 witnesses. Is
Sure.
that still perfectly legal?
Sure. I mean, I'm not well versed in European law, but it's typical for any contract if 2 witnesses sign.
Right. Well, the assets are actually in the States.
Okay. Well, whatever. You can do it in the States. If you want to use 2 witnesses, it's fine. You can do it that way, or you can have it notarized.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for the blessing of having this webinar.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Alice.
Thank you.
Jabby, go ahead. You are, let me see if I can unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Randall. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, I've been told trustees can be sued because they hold the liability. And is that just for a revocable trust? Because my friend said it was also for an irrevocable trust. Does that condition?
What are they being sued for, and why? It wouldn't have any, unless there's malfeasance on their part as far as assets in the trust. Then if they get sued, you'd have to tell me why they're getting sued.
Car accident, whatever.
Well, they might be in a car accident, but if the trust doesn't own the car, then it's on their insurance, and they may be sued personally, but they don't own. They own the assets, but not in their name. They own it under the name of them being a trustee for the trust. So it's totally separate. It's not theirs.
Well, let me ask you this. When can one be sued? In what instance can one be sued, given your experience with your trust?
Well, let's say the trust has a house, and somehow the house gets, somebody doesn't take care of the property, or they fall down on the property, or a piece of wood on the deck gives way and the person is injured, then it's possible that the suit would include the house and any other assets in it. That's why it's good to have, every time you have a new asset, like if you have a house, you break it off and you put it in its own trust away from your liquid assets.
Is it better to have an LLC under a trust and put the house in an LLC? Is it just as
Yeah, you can. I often talk to people about forming an LLC for certain aspects, and then the person can be, it can be 1 or 2% or 3% or 50%, and the trust would be the rest of the percentage for the LLC. But an LLC is a limited liability company, so it doesn't go, it's only what's in the LLC that can be sued, not beyond that.
not in the umbrella?
Or the owner. That's why they created it. That's
Now, let me ask you.
Your liability strictly stays with the LLC.
Okay, let me ask you this, which is very relevant. Somebody has a will in probate, or somebody has designed their will already and it's structured.
Yes.
And would a minute order trump a will? How does that work?
Well, the person can change into will if they're still alive.
Well, I mean, let's say they pass away, but they have a last entry for a minute order, but they have and it does not coincide with the will. Does the minute order take precedent over the will?
Depends how the minute order is written and what it ties into.
Yeah, I think we're getting into some real complexities here that might need to be answered in a different setting. Let's get back to kind of just the purposes and how the trust actually works. Is that okay, Randall? Or did you want to finish that?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I've run it a number of ways, and I've run it. We had a vacation rental, and we ran it out of an LLC with a trust being the majority owner, and the LLC took in all the money and paid any possible taxes due, and then the rest went to the trust.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's a question here in the chat. So the grantor, this is from DR Crypto. So the grantor can be actively involved in decisions, directing actions regarding the assets, any income or distributions? Question.
Well, the trustees he can ask the trustees to make this thing happen, but it's the trustees that have to sign the document that makes it happen. In other words, a grantor can be an active participant in the process of the trust, but ultimately the trustees are the ones that have to sign on the line.
Okay. Great, thank you. Stu, we're going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and give Randall your question.
Awesome, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
3 real simple questions. One, I had heard you mention that once you form the trust that you should submit some documents to the county.
No, you only submit documents to the county on a statutory trust, and on a common law trust, the only documents you're going to submit to the county would be let's say you have a piece of property, then you would have to go to the county office. The trustees would have to go to the county office and show that the house has been assigned to the trust and is no longer under the name of the individual previous owner.
Okay, so if there's any titles, you're just saying just transfer the titles into the trust.
If you have a title would have to shift and it has to be recorded. The same with if you have a bank account and you have an investment and you want it to go into the trust, then you would have to go to that investment office and you'd have to show them the paperwork so that they could reassign it to the name of the trust.
Awesome. Second question. when you mentioned leasing a car.
Yeah, the trust can lease a car. I would recommend the trust not owning a car. Any liability can affect the trust. So
what I was asking was, do you get it with the trust itself as business credit, or are you still like the personal guarantor and you're just using the credit, the EIN of the trust?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear.
I think he's asking, how do you lease the car in the name of the trust?
Right, because the trust doesn't have any credit. If I was to go personally lease a vehicle, I would need a credit score.
Yeah, you take your credit score as grantor or trustee, but you use that credit score to be able to lease the car, but you put it under the name of the trust.
Okay, and last question. In purchasing a trust, is it better to be the trustee and you have other people as the beneficiary, or should you be the beneficiary?
It's a real personal process. You have to decide how you want to run this flexible document. Most older people, and especially 20 years ago when I started this, they just wanted to turn their assets over to the trustees, and they wanted to just kind of relax and not have to worry about it anymore. If you're young and active and you want to have more control, then you can be one of the trustees. You can have a nominee, a friend be the grantor, and you can put money into the trust or assets into the trust, and then you could be one of the beneficiaries as long as you have an independent second trustee and possibly another beneficiary.
Gotcha. Thank you, Randall.
Thank you, Stu. Okay, X Machines, go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is quite simple. For someone who's just starting on this material, would you recommend a certain reading or book?
Yes. There's one of the first things I would do is you can email me. I don't know whether you have the email or whether Tanzan's going to post it at the end, but and then I have a simple, it's probably 15-page trust manual that gives you the general gist of it. And then there's also a really good series called Passing the Buck. And it's quite complex though, and it takes, you got to just dedicate yourself to do it. And you also have The Law of Trust by George Bogart, and then I have a 6-volume set of trust law that the courts use to look up and make sure that the trust works on that particular element. So there's a lot of reading, but the first thing to do is start off with a trust manual, and it gives you an overview. And then you can email me questions after that. I don't know whether we're going to give out my email just yet, but we'll talk to Tanzan about that.
Hi, this is Tanzan.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that your email would be given to clients. So as soon as you have a trust, you would have Randall's email address, and you would have telephone and email communication. Before you have a trust with us, you can get in touch with us through the contact points already given earlier in the show, and Carrie will post those again before we conclude. Okay?
Works for me.
Is that good? You're kind of echoey, so I'm keeping you muted.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, right now it's best if you go through the Brilliance and Commerce website, and then we can go from there.
Or if you have if somebody brought you to this call, they may have a link, an affiliate link that would connect you as well.
Right.
And then, so we have another question here from Jim. Can the grantor become a manager who is beneficiary as well?
Yes.
Let's see who's next. Michael Koviak. Go ahead with your question.
Nope. I'm sorry. You caught me tangled up and munching on a candy bar. Sorry. I'm afraid that I'm going to be like the first lady because it'll just
Michael, didn't I just write you an email this week?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about yes, sir. Thank you very much.
So we're
we
gonna
talked about
yeah, go ahead and
said.
ask a couple of questions, and then we're gonna keep room for everybody out. So obviously, this is a lot of learning for each of us.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible amount of learning curve. What it would be, my question would be, and I have to step back and allow someone else to take it, because it would be like, let me give you a brief. All right, self-employed. I stepped out of the system way back in '89.
Yeah.
Like I just signed a W-9 to a customer. All right.
Yeah.
It was, I did some work for them, and one of the boxes checked off, it said trust. All right.
Okay.
And what I want to basically do is just run my business through the trust.
Sure. You can do that.
And find out what the most efficient way that is to do that, all the nuances and everything, which would, and I'd pay you for this time, not just to buy in the trust, but also,
right,
whatever your hourly charge is, to go through and, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. What are the steps I need to do that? And then go from there. And in the midst of all that, do this learning curve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There is
so I can get up and run.
There is a fairly substantial learning curve, but the basics is not. And I forget how many emails we've had back and forth, but if you get the gist of what we talked about in the early slideshow, then you begin to understand. So I wouldn't be afraid to do a W-4 or W-9. And I had one client ask me what I should take a 1099, because otherwise they want to take the money out of my paycheck. And I said, just give them a 1099 and we'll figure out the rest when you get there. So just keep it simple and make it work for you so that you can collect all that money. And then before the end of the year, you've just got to make a decision to get the trust. And I'll coach you. Once you get the trust, I'm really open to coaching.
Well, I've just accomplished to finish the 2250. It took, be surprised if you just track as far as what's coming down in the world. If you guys are in the metaphysical stuff and improving yourself, you always have to step back thing, resistance from the other realms, including ourselves, to change. But no, I'm there. I can purchase the trust here in the next week.
Good, Michael. We're gonna go ahead and let a couple more people ask questions, and I just encourage you. It's a great path to be on, and it's just constant learning too until we get ourselves educated in these ways.
Oh yeah, yep. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
You're welcome, dear.
I have a question. Art from California.
Okay, Art, are you on the phone or where are you? I'm trying to find you in the participants field.
I'm on the computer.
Yeah, I see his name here.
Oh, I see him. Okay, Art, go ahead, ask your question.
Where can I get trust manual?
You write to Brilliance in Commerce and tell him what you want, and he'll send it on to me, and we'll see what we can do to support and give you what you need.
I didn't get, I write to who you said?
You write to Tanzan at Brilliance in Commerce. Tanzan can give you that email address. Then you write to him first. And, I mean, unless have you communicated with me personally before?
I did. In fact, I placed the deposit and then we stopped.
Okay, so then you have my email. I've probably responded, and you have my email, so we can go from there. It's really I didn't discuss.
Randall, you just got muted. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. I need to unmute you. Hit the wrong button there.
Anyway,
Thank you.
I haven't discussed this with Tanzan to any extent, but the idea was that it's best if you all go through the Brilliance in Commerce office first, unless you've already got my email and we have communicated before.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have Antonio next. Could you go ahead and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. If I have an LLC and I want to run it as a family business and have all trusts managed through that, is that possible?
You would have the trust be a member or part owner of the LLC. Then you run your business through the LLC and the profit would go into your trust and or you.
Okay, so if I had a lawyer on board, accountant hired an accountant, I can hire my own staff is what I'm saying, and then I just give the direction.
You could do that, but I wouldn't have a lawyer be a trustee because they work for the court, not you.
Correct. Okay. That was it.
Okay, thank you so much. John M.
Hello, yes, thank you. My question is about relatives. Is a stepchild a relative or an in-law? Are they relatives?
It depends how close they are.
Well,
if you have a fourth cousin out there somewhere, then it's not related. But if any of your relatives are involved at all, then I would suggest having a friend that's somebody that's not related.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if it was blood or if it was through marriage or
Well, it's all of that.
It's all of that. Okay.
It just gets too close. It's too incestuous, and then you don't really have the situation. You don't have the separation. You need to have a non-related trustee that's willing to say no.
Right.
If he feels it's a wrong decision.
Okay. And I do have your trust, and thank you for all your work. Appreciate your time.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, John. Okay, we have a
Carrie?
couple more questions. Yes.
I just wanted to mention also for people who wanted more reading material, don't forget the ebook. So that's available on our website in the trust section.
Absolutely.
everyone who hasn't already read the Pure Natural Law Trust ebook, we gave the website earlier. We'll give it again. And anyone who invited you to this, go to their link. But on the trust section of the website, there's the ebook. That's in addition to the more substantial books that Randall mentioned, the Passing the Buck. Information on those have been posted in our newsletters. And once again, earlier in the show, we gave the subscription to the newsletter. We'll give it again before we conclude. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the newsletters, and we will provide the points to connect in with the books, the Passing the Buck book.
Yeah, Passing the
And
Buck.
there's also a newsletter, the Passing the Buck newsletter.
It's very good.
Randall has been recommending it for his clients. And if you're not already a client, you can also subscribe anyway to the newsletter as well as purchase the book. The ebook that I was referring to, though, earlier is free, and that's only about 50 pages. It's rather introductory, and that's available on our website.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Ralph Gurgle, let's see. I don't have a way to unmute you. Ralph, can you unmute yourself? Or type your question in the chat. For some reason, a few of you aren't showing up that I can unmute you. How about Sue's Apple? Can you unmute yourself? Don't know if we have audio for you. You may need to type your question into the chat as well, and I will read a couple of the questions out of the chat. Can we take funds, this is from James Griffin, can we take funds out of the trust for day-to-day living, such as paying for groceries, electrical bills, etc.? Do these funds become taxable? Is there a method to do this without it becoming taxable?
The trust can pay you a salary. And what you do with that salary is dependent upon how you're dealing with IRS. But that means that there's no tax in the trust for that transaction. So when it comes to personal items, I always tell the client to pay themselves a check and then go cash it and then buy your personal items. You don't want the trust buying personal items. Use that only to hold assets and or run the business.
And then the person would, when they're getting paid those checks, if that ends up being taxable income, then they would have to pay taxes on that little bit.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And then Alizi's grantor equals settler equals protector, correct? She just wanted to verify that.
No. Settler, grantor, and creator. The protector is totally different and can't be related to either the trustees or the settler or the beneficiary.
So let's see, I think this is Sue's Apple. How are the capital gains or dividends created in the trust taxed? I heard something about transferring those amounts to the beneficiaries. If transferred, then would the amounts be taxable to the beneficiaries?
Yes.
Okay. And Ralph, were you able, the chat is down at the bottom of your screen. Were you able to type your question in there? And I think Pat Palmer, you were unmuted. Were you wanting to ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a simple overview thing. This is an irrevocable trust, and yet you're giving examples of all kinds of flexibility, do's and undo's and changes and all that. So simply, what part of this whole process is irrevocable, and then everything else is changeable? So what is the irrevocable part?
The irrevocable part is the fact that you can't just go in and take all the assets out and put them back in your pocket.
Simple as that.
You're using the trust to either participate in a business or an investment. You can pay yourself a salary, but you can't just go in and take money out of the trust and use it for your own personal expenses unless you take it as a beneficial interest. It's irrevocable in the sense that, say you have $100,000 and you put it into the trust, you can't just go take it out again. And you use the trust. I'm sorry?
As a trustee.
No, you can't. Even as a trustee, you can't just take that 100,000 and put it in your own pocket. The idea of the trustee is to enhance and grow that asset and make it stronger, and then you can pay part of it out as beneficial interest, but you can't just take it back. That's the irrevocable.
Okay.
You can't. Irrevocable means you can't change your mind to not do the trust anymore.
Right. Okay.
Now,
Well,
now, on the other hand, at the end of 25 years, if you and the trustees and the beneficiaries all decide you don't want to do it that way anymore, then you can distribute all of the assets in the trust to the beneficiaries on a pro rata basis, however much beneficial interest they have.
Randall, I thought it might be of benefit to them and to everybody else if you explain why we choose to make the trust irrevocable and what the problem and the pitfall of making a revocable trust is, and what the benefit to the client is for making it irrevocable.
That's
Sure.
a great suggestion.
The revocable trust means that the grantor has control over the whole thing and can end it at any time he wants. He's usually the revocable trust. He's the grantor and the trustee and the beneficiary. That's what makes it revocable. An irrevocable trust means that he can't have all three of those hats. He can only have two at the most. And he can't just dissolve it on his own.
Okay.
And in a revocable trust can be sued, and so it goes. Not only they can sue the trust, but they can sue the grantor as well because he has control over it.
Right. Right. Now, so in an irrevocable trust, the beneficiaries is a changeable aspect. A trustee can change the beneficiaries. They have the control over that.
Well, they wouldn't just change the beneficiaries. That's mostly up to the grantor. The grantor,
So that's an irrevocable aspect then, huh?
Yes, and the grantor can put as many people down. Like let's say he has a son for now, and then his son gets married and has children. Then the grantor can have the trustees make up a minute that would say, on the event of my passing and the passing of my son, that the children get to be the beneficiaries. Basically, it's writing a list of who you want to be future beneficiaries.
Now, that's a request of the trustees or an order?
It's basically an order. If the grantor says, this is a list of the future beneficiaries that I want to see happen, then the trustees carry out that desire for the grantor.
So that's is that the only order that a grantor has over the trustees, or can the grantor make all kinds of orders?
Well, it's not making an order, it's making a request. And typically the trustees, their job is to make sure that the grantor wishes are carried out.
Okay.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm sort of trying to establish the lines of control here. How much control is the grantor exhibiting when he's not supposed to have any control at all?
He doesn't have any control. He can only work and ask the trustees to do certain things, but he can't do them himself. He can ask the trustees to have future beneficiaries that in case of my demise, then I would like to have these future beneficiaries. And he may even have a list of if one of the trustees leaves, that this person would replace them as well.
Okay, and the grantor also can request who's going to be the trustee, I suppose, huh?
Sure, in the future. Can make a list for future trustees.
But not order the trustees to do that.
No, because he's not in charge anymore. He's given up control.
Okay.
He's relinquished all control of the assets and the actions of the trustees. Now, a good trustee will always look out for the assets in the trust and for the grantor and for the beneficiaries.
Okay, because I was thinking in terms of having a nominee grantor who could just be a friend or a neighbor to create the trust, and then they wouldn't really have much to say about it after that. They could resign.
They don't have, there's no resignation. He just signs one of the documents as he gives up all control over the trust to the trustees. So basically, even if you're the settler, you no longer, and you are a beneficiary, the settler doesn't do anything anymore unless he becomes a manager. Then you as manager can do certain things. You can help manage the trust, but you as settler, you don't. It's not yours anymore. You've finished. You put the asset in, and it's gone. It's in the trust.
Okay, thank you. That answers my questions.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, Hanson and Randall, I've got 3 more questions here in the chat, and I think we'll get quick answers to these and then call an end to the questions. See, like Ralph is trying to talk, but we're not hearing him.
We can barely hear you, Carrie.
Oh, how about now? Can you hear me better?
Not really. You're showing Ralph on the screen as the speaker.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, ask your question, Ralph.
Yes, excuse me. My question is, you've said it probably several times, but well, first off, I want to do a disclaimer that anything that I may ask and so forth, not to be misconstrued as practicing law. All we're doing here is, on my part anyway, is sharing legal and or lawful information. Question is, a grantor versus trustee. I'm understanding, is that correct or not, that they cannot hold both posts? Can you be a grantor and a trustee for management considerations?
Well, yes, you can do that as long as you're not a beneficiary.
Right, exactly. Beneficiary is a beneficial interest is a whole separate thing.
Yes.
All right, and then let's see. Instant to that, if I'm understanding correctly, I should be able to put all my assets. I'm sorry. We're going to have the main trust, and then off of that, several other trusts with the different assets. Like example, a house would be in one trust. Vehicle A would be in a trust. Vehicle B would be in another trust, and so forth. And that way, I've got to whatever degree protection. And
yes.
And you know, from they're typically being a sovereign type of a trust, and all the veil of the trust cannot be penetrated. Is that basically true? Short of any major things like death, killing, murder, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, as long as as long as it's a lawful process, no. It can't be invaded.
Okay, and instant to that, I'm wondering if there's wisdom to putting a declaration, verified declaration of trust into the, not filed, but recorded into the county record. I think would that be a good idea?
No.
Just so that there's public notice that such a trust exists?
No, you don't need it. This is a private contract. This is a private contract between you and the trustees.
Okay, that's much more clarified. I understand that now. How about the trust should be able to, true or false, be able to get its own bank account?
Yes.
It should be able to hold any credit cards and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. And because what I'm looking for in my particular case here, and I don't want to get going here ad nauseum, but I just want to protect what I have for my two children, and they will be, I'll be the grantor and trustee for guidance, and then it's my demise, then everything reverts over to them in the respective posts and so forth, and the assets are protected and perpetuated on to their guidance and so forth. Is that basically a true assumption on my part?
Yes, but again, I would suggest you have a successor trustee or you have a second trustee already working with you.
Already working, I see. Okay, because what I was saying upon my demise, that the post they can't be, the grantor is already granted the trust, but the trusteeship would pass on to the successor, so named.
Right. Yes. And if it goes on for any length of time, you're going to have different trustees along the way.
I see. Now, then that clarifies things in my mind. Now, effectively, what you're doing is I could purchase from you a corpus, a trust corpus, right? That has all the covenants and so forth.
Yes.
Because I just discovered you folks here. I just happened to trip on you this evening and all, and it's all overwhelming to me, going through your website and everything. But that's what we're looking at. Then that should give me all the guidance that I would need to carry out and administer and manage the trust then at large, huh?
It'll certainly get you started, and so I would make sure that I went on to the Brilliance in Commerce website and download whatever's available on the trust. Tanzan just alluded to the 2 different manuals there, and then the newsletter, Passing the Buck, and the books there. And I have, if you really want to get into it, I can give you all a list of law books, but I don't think you need to go that far.
No, probably not. But I guess the whole thing can be managed through monthly meetings or whatever they're deemed to be periodically, and then covered by the minutes and so forth for any further administration, right?
Sure. And you can do it like let's say there's a transaction you want to carry out, and even though you just had a trustee meeting last week, all you have to do, I have some clients that their trustee is a distance away, and so you just scan the document and send it to them. They read it, and if they agree, they sign it, then they scan it back to you, and then you have it in your record.
I see. Okay, yeah, that clarifies things further. Going back to my original thought of the necessity or non-necessity of doing a declaration of trust, what I could do is just have a separate document and then have it notarized and so forth. Then I could take that document and transferring or conveying the truck and car and so forth into the main trust, and then having the main trust itself. I guess as long as we have that declaration, that's a document I could carry to the title bureau and so forth for conveyance, right?
Yes, but I'm suggesting that you don't take any vehicle and put it in a trust with assets in it.
Oh, right, exactly. Each I'm envisioning each vehicle will have its own, will be in its own trust.
Fine, you can do it that way.
And then they would be those trusts would be held by the main trust itself.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I've got a further clarification now on the whole thing, and I do thank you very much for being here. My gosh, you folks are really something else. I mean,
Thanks,
this is
Bob.
really
Okay.
something, and
Yeah.
I do
you
thank
so
you.
much.
Sure, bye now.
Okay, so I have 3 more questions here. Thompson, I know we've gone about an hour and 40 minutes. I'll ask these 3 questions quickly and then move on to close.
Gary, your voice has faded into infinity. Can
you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah. Now you're
Oh,
back
you
on.
just came back
I don't
from
know what you
Mars.
did, but now you're back on.
I don't know why my headset seems to not be feeding through properly. Thank you for letting me know that. So questions here, when the grantor passes, can the trustee change the beneficiaries?
Not unless there's a list. In other words, their job is to take care of those beneficiaries as they are, and they, unless the grantor has left a list of future beneficiaries, no, they can't until the beneficiaries and the trustees desire or agree to dissolve the trust.
Okay, is the grantor the only one who can choose future beneficiaries?
Yes.
Okay. Another question. Can you briefly talk about how to open a bank account under the trust and what is needed?
Typically,
you've already said there's the one page.
Some banks will allow you to take, there's a section at the back that says what pages to take to the bank. And there's four documents, and those all have to be notarized. And then you take that to the bank and say, you gotta take a trustee with you. They won't just open it with you if you're a manager. The trustee has to sign on the line. And if both your trustees are in the same town, then I would take them both. And sometimes the bank will allow you to also be a signator on the account. Some banks won't do that.
Right. Okay, and you've already answered this. Does the trust have to have more than one trustee? And is a founder the same as a grantor?
Yeah. Founder and grantor is an interchangeable name. And you can have one trustee, but you need to have a successor trustee lined up.
Okay, and then so from Sophia, if you have a nonprofit as a beneficiary in the trust, then how do you donate the money from for the nonprofit to operate?
The trust can give up to 100% of all of its assets to a foundation if it wants. The trust is able to gift pre-tax dollars anywhere it wants to.
Okay. Cool. And someone's asking if there will be a replay available. And yes, there will. Tonson will notify and let you guys know where to get this. Tonson, would you like to hop back on?
Yes, we will be announcing the replay from the archives in our newsletters. So again, subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already.
Okay, and shall I switch over to screen sharing and you can talk through these details of where to, Tonson?
Yes, if you want to put up the slide that, next. There we go. So that's the series. We have the Trust webinar series. December 5th is today. Then you have January 9th, February 6th, and March 6th, 4 p.m. Pacific time. And the details for how to connect with the webinars will be announced in the newsletters. And so you would click on the link of the person who invited you, or go generally to houseoffreedomtrust.com, and there are the trust ebook. But on the next slide, I think we have the subscription details. houseoffreedomtrust.com with dashes between each of the words. Click on more and then newsletter sign up. And then we have a phone number. If anyone can't access via the website for whatever reason, use 360-200-7521. Generally, it will go into a message and then we'll get back to you. Preferably, of course, the online would be appreciated to reduce the manpower needed. But it is available as a backup if you need it, the phone number.
So the point is, Tonson, if they sign up for the newsletter, then they'll be getting the updates from you on where the video is available of this, the recording of this show that we just did, the audio or video, and how they can get other questions answered, correct?
Absolutely. So the playbacks were planned to be made available because many people couldn't make it at this time today. And many people would like to listen while they're driving in the car to the audio. So yes, we will announce the links for the playbacks via the newsletter as well as the future webinars.
Yeah, so the website is house-of-freedom-trust.com. House-of-freedom-trust.com with a dash in between each word. And the phone number here is 360-200-7521 as a second choice. And newsletter sign up at the website will keep you updated on where to get the replay and further instructions on attending more training.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you would like to say, Tonson?
Randall, anything concluding?
No, I'm just looking forward to the next one.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody's video on? I guess I'm here by myself, but we can just go back to House of Freedom Trust, and we're so glad to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really great conversation, and we want to thank Randall for taking the time to share all this education and details with us as we transit some really great, amazing times on planet Earth, and we educate ourselves as how to be more intelligent at how we run our lives, our economics, and how to move forward more strongly into the future.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Happy holiday season, everyone.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and end the meeting.